Every generation has that one song, the one that takes over the radio, your playlists, and the world. And then suddenly, it's gone. But what happens to the people behind those hits? Many walked away from fame. Others were taken far too soon, sometimes in ways that still raise eerie questions. Knick-Knack News presents The Curse of the One-Hit Wonders, a two-part series of iconic musicians whose lives ended as mysteriously as they began. Number 1. Before punk had attitude, before rock and roll had rebels in leather jackets, there was Bobby Fuller, a Texas-born dreamer with a guitar, a hot rod, and a sound caught somewhere between Buddy Holly and rebellion. In 1966, at just 23, Bobby hit gold with his gritty anthem, "I Fought the Law, and the Law Won." The song became a cultural lightning bolt, defiant, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. He wasn't just another crooner, he was rock and roll. But Bobby wasn't playing by the industry's rules. He refused to be molded by label executives, fought with managers, and kept his band's sound fiercely independent. That didn't sit well with everyone, especially in an era where record deals were less partnerships and more contracts of control. And then, the music stopped. Just months after the song hit the top 10, Bobby Fuller was found dead in his mother's Oldsmobile, parked outside his Hollywood apartment. The scene made no sense. His body was bruised, doused in gasoline, and the air reeked of chemicals. Police ruled it suicide, but his family, and nearly everyone who saw the crime scene, called it impossible. Who would beat himself, pour gasoline on his own body, then crawl into a car in the July heat? Even the autopsy raised eyebrows. A broken finger, unexplained wounds, and a gasoline-soaked rag with no burns. It felt more like a message than a mystery. Theories exploded. Some said mob involvement. Others whispered about corrupt music execs trying to silence an artist who wanted out of his contract. There were even murmurs of LAPD cover-ups tied to local payola scandals. One journalist wrote, "Bobby Fuller didn't fight the law. The law won before he even had a chance." Nearly 60 years later, the case remains officially unsolved. But among fans, one lyric echoes like prophecy, "I fought the law, and the law won." Number 2. Pete Burns. The 1980s were an era of boldness. The louder, the flashier, the better. And no one embodied that chaos quite like Pete Burns. As the face of the band Dead or Alive, Pete didn't just perform, he commanded. With his fiery curls, androgynous look, and voice that could cut through synths like glass, he turned "You Spin Me Round," like a record, into a global sensation. It was the perfect storm of sound and spectacle, unapologetically queer, flamboyant, and decades ahead of its time. Pete wasn't just an artist, he was a revolution in eyeliner and attitude. But fame is a cruel mirror. After Dead or Alive's success faded, Pete's image became his obsession. Tabloids mocked his endless cosmetic surgeries. Television turned his pain into entertainment, each appearance more shocking, more heartbreaking than the last. He once said, "Every time I fix something on the outside, I'm just trying to fix something broken on the inside." By the 2000s, Pete was a reality TV spectacle, part human curiosity, part cautionary tale. He'd filed for bankruptcy, endured countless failed surgeries, and battled loneliness behind his glittered facade. Friends described him as beautifully tragic, a man who created himself so completely that the world forgot he was human underneath. On October 23, 2016, Pete Burns died suddenly of cardiac arrest at age 57. But fans weren't ready to believe it was just sudden. Years of physical strain from surgeries, hormone treatments, and unverified health complications fed whispers that his death was foreseen or forced. In the months before, he'd spoken cryptically online. "When I go, it won't be from this world. It'll be because I refuse to stay the same." To some, it was poetic foreshadowing. To others, a cry for help that nobody heard. Today, Pete Burns is remembered not just for his song, but for his defiance. He spun the world around him until the world spun him out. Number 3 was Shannon Hoon. It's 1993. Grunge is king, MTV still plays music, and a strange little video about a B-girl suddenly takes over the world. The song, No Rain. The voice, Shannon Hoon. He wasn't a polished pop star. He was raw, barefoot, unpredictable. The kind of artist who made you feel like he was singing straight from his veins. With Blind Melon, Shannon gave the Misfits their anthem, a song about loneliness that somehow made everyone feel together. But success hit hard. Almost overnight, the band went from van tours to sold-out arenas, and Shannon, that small-town Indiana boy, was swallowed whole by it. Behind every smiling performance was chaos, drugs, depression, and the feeling that fame had arrived too soon. He'd recently become a father. A moment, he said, changed everything. In interviews, he promised to clean up. He wanted his daughter to see her dad alive, not legendary. But the pressure kept building. October 21st, 1995. Blind Melon's tour bus sits parked in New Orleans. The crew thinks Shannon's just sleeping. When they finally check, he's gone. Cocaine overdose, age 28. But here's where the story feels haunting. Just weeks earlier, Shannon had been filming everything. Hours of personal footage, confessions, and breakdowns. It was as if he was documenting his own descent. One line from his journal reads, "I'm scared of what happens if this all stops spinning." Some fans believe it wasn't just drugs that killed him. It was the industry itself, the burnout machine that chews up sensitive souls and calls it rock and roll. He's saying, "All I can say is that my life is pretty plain." But it never was. It was brilliant, chaotic, and heartbreakingly brief. Number 4. Falco. Long before anyone called him the Austrian Elvis, Falco was a kid named Johann Hölzel, a classically trained musician with an ego as bold as his sound. In the 1980s, he did the impossible. He took Mozart, the ultimate symbol of high culture, and mashed it with pop, rap, and rebellion. The result? Rock Me Amadeus. It didn't just top the charts, it shattered barriers. Falco became the first German-language artist ever to hit #1 in America. Suddenly, the Vienna clubs he played were packed with tourists. His face was on MTV. His swagger was legendary. He lived fast, spent hard, and mocked the fame that consumed him. But behind the sharp suits and sunglasses was a man haunted by excess and by fear. Friends said he'd begun talking about death, about being too famous too soon. He'd lost close friends to drugs and the darker side of show business. He called the industry a carnival of ghosts. Then came the final album. Released after his death, it was titled Out of the Dark, Into the Light, a phrase that feels less like marketing and more like a farewell. In the title track, Falco sings, "Muss ich denn sterben, zu leben?" Do I have to die to live? Was it poetry or prophecy? A question he wrote and never got to answer. In February 1998, Falco was living quietly in the Dominican Republic, reportedly trying to reinvent himself, sober, reflective, ready for a comeback. Then just days before his 41st birthday, his SUV collided with a bus. Police ruled it an accident, but that's where the story begins to blur. Witness reports conflicted. His blood alcohol level was said to be high, though some close to him insist he'd quit drinking. Others point to missing documents, unexplained damage on the car, and odd timing. Falco had just finished recording new material that insiders say hinted at industry corruption. And then came the conspiracy theories. Online forums claim Falco had been silenced for exposing secret societies through his lyrics. They connected his death to hidden symbols in his videos. The black and white duality of light and dark, his fascination with rebirth, and his references to Masonic control in European music. None of it has ever been proven, but the coincidences are eerie enough to make even skeptics pause. What's undeniable is that Falco's final question, "Do I have to die to live?" became his legacy. Because in death, his fame only grew. His songs were rediscovered, his legend reborn, his prophecy fulfilled. Number 5, Jermaine Stewart. The year was 1986, the height of MTV, neon lights, and shoulder pads. Pop music was loud, sexy, and soaked in excess. And then came Jermaine Stewart, a voice of smooth defiance, a reminder that not every hit had to be scandalous. He gave the world a message that was as catchy as it was pure. We don't have to take our clothes off to have a good time. It was flirtatious, wholesome, and instantly iconic. The song became an anthem for clean fun in an age defined by temptation. But what most listeners didn't realize was that it was also a warning. Before he became a global sensation, Jermaine had danced his way through the entertainment world's background. He started as a soul-trained dancer, one of those shining silhouettes on Saturday TV who made rhythm look effortless. His charisma was undeniable, his smile unforgettable. Soon he went from backup for a culture club to recording artist on his own. He wasn't just singing, he was radiating joy. But fame in the late 80s was a double-edged sword. Behind the music was a growing shadow, the AIDS epidemic, an invisible terror that was tearing through the very world Jermaine performed in. And suddenly, the man who sang about self-control and respect was performing in the eye of the storm. Friends say Jermaine struggled quietly with the industry's hypocrisy. He refused to conform to the hypersexual image his label wanted. He wanted his music to make people feel good, not sell fantasy. And that made him different and dangerous in the eyes of record executives. By the 1990s, trends had shifted. His clean message had faded beneath the new wave of R&B sensuality and grunge rebellion. Record deals dried up. Tour dates vanished. Jermaine disappeared from the spotlight almost as quickly as he'd risen. And then, tragedy. In 1997, Jermaine Stewart died from complications related to AIDS and liver cancer. He was only 39. But here's where the story takes a chilling turn. In his later interviews, Jermaine had hinted that he felt abandoned by the industry, that after years of dancing for them, the business left him to die in silence. Some fans believe his illness wasn't just medical, it was systemic, a slow death caused by an industry that discarded artists who didn't fit the brand. And maybe in a way, Jermaine saw it coming. His biggest hit, that innocent plea for patience and love, feels now like a man crying out against a world he knew would consume him. When he sang, "We don't have to take our clothes off to have a good time," maybe he wasn't just talking about romance. Maybe he was talking about survival. He told the world to slow down, but the world was too busy dancing. Number 6, The Singing Nun. Before viral hits, before YouTube, there was one nun with a guitar who charmed the entire world. Her name was Jeanine, but to millions, she was simply the singing nun. In 1963, her gentle hymn, Dominique, sung entirely in French, became a global sensation. It was pure, innocent, and unlike anything else on the charts. She wasn't chasing fame, she was spreading faith. But fame found her anyway. The song sold millions. She appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show. Even the Vatican praised her. For a brief, shining moment, Jeanine was proof that goodness could still go viral. Then came reality, royalty disputes, taxes, and a church that, instead of protecting her, demanded she hand over her earnings. When she left the convent to start her own life, the institution she once served turned its back on her. In the 1970s, Jeanine spoke openly about her relationship with her partner, Annie Pichet, a taboo that cost her what little support she had left. They struggled with debt, depression, and judgment from both the church and the press. On March 29, 1985, the world learned the impossible. The singing nun was gone. She and Annie had taken their own lives together, leaving a note that read, "We are leaving this life serenely." But serenity isn't what people felt. Questions followed. Had the church excommunicated her? Did financial pressure drive her to despair? Or was she pushed to silence because of who she loved? Her final recordings hinted at bitterness, lyrics about hypocrisy and lost faith. To some, they sound like confessionals. To others, warnings. Today, Dominique still plays in documentaries and vintage playlists, a relic of simplicity. But for those who know the full story, it's not just a hymn. It's a haunting echo of a woman who wanted to serve God and was destroyed by his representatives. That's all for now. They came. They conquered the charts and they vanished, sometimes leaving questions no chart could answer. 6 voices, 6 stories, different eras, same mystery. Why does fame burn brightest for those who leave us first? Which story do you think hides something deeper? Drop your theories in the comments and subscribe to Knick Knack News for more truth behind the tunes.